Friends, first things first. Isn't that what we say to ourselves when we're overwhelmed by the feeling that we need to take care of too many things at once? It means that we have to set priorities. I was reminded of this when I read another brand new order by our now infamous puppet judge Schindler, dated June 26th of this year, in which he kind of danced through the opening ceremonies of last summer's Paris Olympics. I'll tell you what I mean by that at the end of the statement. This statement serves to call attention to my criminal complaint, which I used for my closing argument in court a couple of months ago, and which I'm now making accessible for everyone, after it has already been made public in court, despite the desperate attempts of Judge Schindler to stop me from doing this. With this recent ruling, he reminded me, and I'm sure he did this inadvertently, it was almost like a Freudian mistake, he reminded me of what the monsters are most afraid of. He reminded me of their Achilles heel, so to speak. In his ruling, he states that he will not allow any lawyer to defend me who is not in line with the government. He writes that legal expertise and the fact that I trust the lawyer who I want to be my lawyer is not enough, but that he refuses to allow anyone to represent me if they agree with me that this fake trial in reality is a political trial that serves only one purpose, and that is to take me down in order to stop me from continuing with my investigation of the pandemic and, of course, following up on the results of this investigation by way of a Nuremberg 2 trial, or rather many such trials everywhere. He considers this to be misusing the legal process in an unconscionable way. As examples for such, in his mind, outrageous behavior, he quotes attorney Edgar Simon, who he states, and I quote, sharply explained that this is a political intrigue, end of quote. And he refers to a new book that was published under the title Dr. Rайнера Фюльмиха, The Corona File on Trial, a Legal Scandal. That, Schindler states, shows how the necessary professional distance has been lost, and it means, he further explains, it means that people who speak or write like this, I quote, allow themselves to be manipulated into being used for purposes that are alien to and abusive of the legal proceeding, end of quote. Now, if this was true, and not just another embarrassing and this time explicit confirmation of the true reason for this fake trial, taking me down because of my use of the First Amendment guarantees in order to expose the monstrous crimes against humanity, then no attorney would be allowed to represent a client who is not completely in line with the very government that he needs to defend his client against, but wants to argue his client's case in accordance with his client's wishes, which in many cases correspond with those of the attorney. In other words, no attorney who is not in line with the government and who doesn't fully believe that all these anti-corona measures were perfectly fine, no such attorney will be allowed to represent their client. But in addition to this threadbare fake argument ignores that the real human beings on our side of the fence, as opposed to those on the other side of the fence, still do have the ability to use their own reasoning and make up their own mind, which is in fact totally in accordance with the great philosopher Immanuel Kant's motto, sapere aude, dare use your own reasoning. Nevertheless, this inexcusably stupid ruling did serve to remind me that the Achilles heel of the monsters is indeed the pandemic, as this is the key to the monsters' Pandora's box. This is the key. They are deathly afraid of us opening this box because once it is open, once the corona pandemic is understood, even by many of those who are still on the other side of the fence, but are now waking up, then everything else will be exposed as well. the climate change, climate manipulation, the CO2 hoax, the wars in Ukraine and Gaza, 9/11, the Kennedy murders, etc., etc. And that second step in the right direction, which will lead into these crimes, that second step will be taken with lightning speed overnight. But here's the kicker. We, who are on this side of the fence, we already know. We already know about all the other lies too. And it wouldn't make any sense for them, for the monsters, to try and hide from us what we already know. No. They're in panic because the box is now half open, and more people on the other side of the fence are waking up to what is really going on. More and more victims of the experimental shots are indeed waking up. And all of a sudden they realize that there's absolutely no one there on their side of the fence to help them. So finally, they turn to us for help. And I don't just mean medical help. They're looking for the kind of emotional, human support that they find in our communities, communities that have come into existence and have come together because we were indeed literally persecuted back then, real communities. And we're still being persecuted. Such communities that help each other don't exist on the other side of the fence. There is no human support in that total isolation and loneliness of the world of ritual brainwashing and propaganda. Now, the clear and present danger of more and more of the humans on the other side of the fence breaking ranks with their torturers and brainwashers is exacerbated by the fact that it is not at all true that our side of the fence is not making any progress. On the contrary, the monsters on the other side of the fence are taking one hit after another, all of these hits way below the waterline. And their ship is sinking faster and faster. What am I talking about? Well, here in Germany, for example, there's this very important decision by an administrative law court of, I believe it was September the 4th or the 3rd of 24, a decision that ruled in favor of a nurse who had been fired because she wouldn't take the shots. This court decided, based on the evidence that is based on the content of the unredacted RKI files, which is the equivalent of the CDC files, it decided that, one, there was never any scientific basis for the declaration of a pandemic. Rather, it was political orders that drove the pandemic. And two, the shots were totally ineffective. Well, not really, you know what I mean. In Canada, an activist by the name of Joanne Person had supported the now famous Coots freedom fighters and had come to the attention of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, who had wanted to put her in prison. All charges, however, had to be dropped when a secretly taped audio revealed that the police had plotted to plant a stash of weapons in her house so that they could then charge her with illegal possession of weapons and domestic terrorism. That's how you create crimes. That's the kind of news that makes many people on the other side of the fence very, very nervous. And here's another one. In New Zealand, Barry Young, a whistleblower from the Ministry of Health, supported by Liz Gunn, a former lawyer and journalist, also supported by the American Steve Kirsch, and by my British friend Andrew Bridgen, was able to publish the true mortality rates after vaccination. The numbers he reported are the official New Zealand statistics. At some vaccination centers, more than 30% of those who got the shots died within hours of receiving the shots. In one particular vaccination center in Cargill, it was 100%. 51 out of 51 people who received the experimental shots died within 2 hours. Through an Official Information Act request, OIA request, from a New Zealand doctor, there's now information out in the open that government had possession of the initial Pfizer safety data for the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine months before the government rollout of the vaccination began nationwide, declaring over and over again that the vaccine, of course, was safe and effective. In reality, the opposite was true, and the government knew it. And these phaser data showed absolutely devastating outcomes in terms of numbers of serious injuries and fatalities. The data was so bad, in fact, that the FDA in the United States attempted to have it legally concealed from the public for 75 years, but failed when an American court stopped them from doing this. We, on this side of the fence, have known what's in the Pfizer contract with respect to its government. We've known this for quite a while. But people in New Zealand apparently didn't ever shock or learn that Pfizer itself declared in the contract that they could neither confirm the safety nor the efficacy or effectiveness of the vaccine, and therefore they required to be legally indemnified against all liability for any injury or death from the vaccine. Such provisions in contract are, of course, illegal and void ab initio, void from the beginning, as a legal expert opinion by our Belgian colleagues correctly said. There is much more, of course. For example, that the official Pfizer safety data has lists of adverse reaction covering 9 pages and include 1,223 deaths from the initial trial. This clearly shows that we're dealing not with negligence, but with intent, because all of this was known by the government, not just the New Zealand government. All of this taken together, that is, what we have known about the pandemic for a while, but what comes as the total traumatizing shock to those who are now climbing over the fence to join us, the collapse of the monster's mind of defense, and Schindler's above-quoted ruling. All this together means just one thing to me. It makes a lot of sense to now turn the key to their Pandora's box. That is, get the info about the pandemic out into the open to as many people as possible on the other side of the fence very quickly. Because once that box is open, once this first step has been taken, everything else will follow with lightning speed, literally overnight. The German puppet government is now attempting a last-ditch effort to be saved by the bell and to escape into their summer break. It's a kind of a Hail Mary pass that they're attempting after they suffered a huge blow below the belt when they couldn't get a judge confirmed who had been nominated for a position at the highest German court, the now totally corrupt constitutional court. It became obvious that the German BlackRock chancellor even failed to garner enough support from his own party for this candidate, a woman who wanted to legalize abortion literally up to the last moment of pregnancy. Strange, isn't it, when you consider that during COVID, the monsters clearly demonstrated that abortion by injection is perfectly okay even long after birth, up until very old age. The horror that some of the members of our BlackRock Chancellor's party could barely conceal in their faces would have become even worse had they known how the monsters had planned to celebrate her confirmation. That is, with a combination of the opening celebration for last summer's Olympic Games in Paris and the celebration for the opening of this St. Gotthard tunnel a few years ago. Look it up on YouTube and you'll know what I'm talking about. That is why the exposure of the pandemic and the ensuing number 2 trials should be our first priority under the motto of first things first. And that's why it is no coincidence, if you believe in coincidences at all, that despite all the obstacles they put in my way, despite all the monkey wrenches they threw at me, I finally managed to finish the editing of my closing argument, which I held at the end of my fake trial, and which Schindler, when he finally realized what I was doing, tried to cut short, but as you'll see now, failed to do. It is a criminal complaint against Schindler, the prosecution, and others for kidnapping, perverting the course of justice, which is a very, very serious felony, battery, and many other crimes. It is, in a way, as a direct response to the fake decision Schindler announced on April 24th. And now everyone will be able to see it. I'll start to slowly by publishing the introduction, which summarizes the whole story, and which also includes a table of contents, so that everyone can decide for themselves if they want to know, for example, why I'm still being held captive on the basis of an arrest warrant that was destroyed already on November the 1st, 2023, or if they want to know why it was a kidnapping that happened in Mexico, neither a deportation nor an extradition, or if you simply want to read the whole story. In short, this, I believe, is a very effective counterattack, and it will definitely not fail. So don't forget that we are the cavalry, and we can do anything we want. Thoughts become actions, and actions become things. Finally, I'll tell you about a few songs that remind me of the time when I still thought that everything was okay. Optimistic songs like Feels Like Heaven from Fish Factory, Can't Fight the Moonlight by Leanne Rimes, Say What You Want by Texas, and How Men Are by Ed Tech Camera. I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.